In this section, we're going to build our first social app, and this is going to be a clone of the popular app Instagram, where people can take and post images and then follow people that they like and view their photos. So we're going to replicate that core functionality. And to do that, we're going to need a server. So we're going to need a way to store users' data and photos somewhere on a central location so that we can share them between users. And we're going to be using a platform called Parse Server, which is an offshoot of Parse.com and allows you to host data like usernames, passwords, photos on your own servers. So it allows you to essentially have a database without needing to manage or code your own database. The great advantage of using Parse Server over another solution such as Firebase is that Parse Server is completely stored on your own server. So you're completely in control of your own data and can move it to another server if you like, and you're not at risk of your app failing if the company that you're using for data storage shuts down. So Parse Server you can run on any service provider you like, including Heroku, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, but we're going to be using the most popular cloud service in the world, which is AWS, or Amazon Web Services. And one of the big reasons we're using AWS is because they offer a free tier which will allow you to completely try out Parse Server on AWS for 12 months without paying anything at all. You also get $50 of AWS credit with this course. So, enough preamble, let's get started. Go over to aws.amazon.com and click Sign in to the console. If you don't have an Amazon account, then you'll need to create one here. If you do, then just log in with your Amazon username and password. So I'm going to log in with rob@robpercival.co.uk and my password. And now we're logged in, we're going to jump to services, and you can see the huge range of services that AWS offers. We're going to go for EC2, which is short for Elastic Compute Generation Number 2. But essentially the elastic part of it means that it stretches to provide the resources that you need. So if you only need a very small amount of resources because you're just testing out a new app, then you'll only be charged for those resources. And indeed, if you're running them on the free tier, you won't be charged anything at all. However, if you do need more resources because your app starts getting popular, then you will get charged more for that. So the great thing is you only pay for what you use, but the flip side of that is do be careful and monitor your account just in case your app becomes more popular than you think it is. All right, so we're going to click Launch Instance to create a new AWS instance, which is essentially like a server for us to store our data on. And now we're going to go to AWS Marketplace and search for Parse. And we're going to use Parse Server powered by Bitnami. So you can see it's free tier eligible. So just select that. And this essentially makes the installation of Parse Server very easy. So make sure you choose the T2 Micro, which is free tier eligible. And then just click Review and Launch. And then Launch. And now we need to choose or create a key pair, which we'll be using in a moment to access our AWS instance. So I'm going to create a new key pair, and I'm going to call this Instagram Android, because I've already got an iOS Instagram for my iOS course. So then I'm just going to download that and then launch instance. And this will then set up everything that you need to use Parse Server with AWS. You'll notice here that I'm on Firefox rather than Chrome. Now that's because we're now going to access our AWS instance, and we're going to use a bit of software that works on Firefox but doesn't work on Chrome. So I'd recommend using Firefox for this next step. I'm now going to click on the instance name to load up the dashboard for that instance. And what we need to do is find the application ID and client key, which are stored and automatically generated when the Parse Server instance is set up. So to do that, we're going to click Connect. and we're going to be connecting via something called SSH, or Secure Shell, which essentially allows us to log into our AWS instance and run commands on it. Now, if you're familiar with SSH, you can use any SSH client to do this and just follow those instructions. But I'm going to use the Java SSH client, and that's because it works directly with Firefox and doesn't require any installation. So I think that's the simplest process unless you've got an SSH client that you use already. Then we leave the public DNS username, key name the same, and we just have to give a key path, i.e. we need to give it the location of this Instagram Android key that I created a few moments ago. So if you're in Windows, then you just enter C:/ and then whatever the location of that file is. So wherever you saved it. If you're on a Mac, then if you find the file and click on it, then you can control click and click get info, and that will tell you where it is. So this is users, Rob Percival, desktop. So it's / users with a capital U, and then Rob Percival, desktop with a capital D, and then I'll just remind myself of the file name, Instagram Android.pem. There we go. And I'd recommend keeping that in the browser cache so you don't have to enter it every time. And then click Launch SSH Client, and you'll likely see a couple of pop-ups if you haven't done this before that require you to install the SSH client. Just click OK and run through the process. And then you should see something like this. So this means we're logged into our Parse server and all has gone well. If you don't see that, the most likely issue is that the private key path is wrong. So just check that and make sure that you've definitely got that right, and then launch the SSH client again. All right, so now we're logged into our AWS instance. We need to find out what the client key and app ID are so that we can enter them in our Android app and connect to our Parse server. So to do that, we need a couple of fairly simple SSH commands. And the first is cd for change directory. And then we want to change directory to apps/parse/htdocs. So that's where most of the Parse server files are stored. And then we're going to use a command called vi, which is short for vim, which opens up a text editor. And the file that we want to edit in this text editor is server.js, which is the file where the settings that we need have been stored. And again, if all goes well, you should see this. So this is all the data that you need to connect to your app. All right, so give yourself a slap on the back if you managed to do that. I'm going to leave that running for the moment, and then in the background, I'm going to go to android-devcourse.com/parseproject.zip. And this is essentially an Android Studio project, which contains everything you need to get started with an app that connects to Parse server. And then when that's downloaded and expanded, you should have a Parse server starter project folder wherever you expanded the zip file. All right, don't worry, we're nearly there. We're now going to jump over to Android Studio and open up that new file. So file, open. And then for me, it was in the desktop, which is up here. And there it is, Parse server starter project. So click OK. And then this will open up just like any Android Studio project, just like all the other ones that you've downloaded from this course. Here we go. So just in the normal way, click Project, and then we'll have a look in Parse Starter Project, Java, and you can see we've got two files here. The first is main activity, which looks very similar to what we're used to. It's just got a little parse line which sets off parse analytics. And then you'll see a second class starter application, which is what does the connection to our Parse server. So we're going to need three things: an application ID, a client key, and a server, which is essentially the address of our AWS instance. So let's start at the top, application ID. So if we find the Java app that we're using to connect to our AWS instance, and you can see here we've got the app ID, so just select it, copy using Control-C, and then paste. Be careful if you accidentally include some of the double quotes. So just delete those afterwards, and then same with the client key, which is the same as the master key here. So just copy that. And finally, the server URL, which is this big long one there. And it does actually go on to the next line for me. So make sure you get the whole thing, including the parse at the end. There we go. So now, finally, our setup process is at an end. You can see we've got a bit of code here, which all it does is creates a new parse object and then saves it on the server. So we're going to be looking at that in more detail in the next video to see how that actually works. But for now, let's just run a quick test to see if this app does what we want it to, i.e. saves some data on the server. So it should save an example object with a my number value of 123 and a my string value of Rob. And just before we run that, there's one very quick thing we need to add, and don't forget this, otherwise you'll get an error. We need to add a backslash on the end of parse there, just like that. And now, this with any luck will save our example object on our Parse server on AWS. You might be wondering how we will know whether that's saved or not, and we can do that pretty easily by pasting in the address that we had and then just replace parse at the end with apps. And this, if everything is working, will bring up the Parse dashboard or data browser, which will allow you to look at and edit, if you want, the data that's been saved on your server. So let's click on My Bitnami Parse API, and you can see, here we go. So this is our Parse dashboard, and currently we've got no data and no users. So going back over to Android Studio, it should be running. So let's take a look in Android Monitor, and you can see we've got parse results successful, excellent. So it's looking very promising. So now let's just go back over to our data browser or Parse dashboard, and I'm just going to refresh that, and we should, with any luck, see our example object saved in our data browser. And there we go. You can see we've got an example object, and it's got an object ID automatically created, and we've got Rob as my string and 123 as my number. And we've also got a session and user created as well. We'll be using the user object later on. Excellent. So well done if you managed to follow along with all of that. What we've essentially done is set up Parse server on our AWS instance, which means we can save all sorts of user data images in the cloud and then sync them across devices with our apps. In the next video then, we'll go back over to Android Studio and we'll see how this Parse object code works and see what else we can do with Parse as well. I'll see you there.